Chapter 1290, 6 Fireball. Luo Seng rushed towards Solong Daiji, his body burning in the air like a huge fireball. As he charged, the flames became more and more fierce. Gradually, the fireball had turned into a huge fireball with a diameter of 4 or 5 meters. Facing this attack, Solong Daiji did not take it lightly, but chose to dodge cautiously. However, after sprint, the fireball quickly rushed towards Solong Daiji. The speed was getting faster and faster. The rolling friction was small. There was nothing to do. Swish! White mist soon filled the battlefield. Gawain melted the ice and snow, and then vaporized it. The battlefield was full of white steam. For a while, it was difficult to see where people were. And, because the entire battlefield had been covered with flames by Luo Seng in advance, there was no way to turn on the infrared viewing mode. As a result, the scene on the battlefield was unclear to people outside. Zhang Yi could not help but nodded slowly and exclaimed, "Really smart." As an expert in practical combat, Liang Yu also saw the wonderful use of this trick. He knows that this battle is not the final one. Even if he wins this round, he still has to face the next enemy. So, he didn't give others the opportunity to observe his fighting style. Even Zhang Yi was helpless in the face of this situation. The way humans observe external objects is nothing more than the 5 senses of the body. Among them, what the eyes see is the main way to observe external objects. When you can't see, your judgment of a thing will be greatly reduced. He can't see it and other people can't see it either. Now, everyone can only wait for the result of the battle inside. Solong Daiji was in the white fog, and there was a rumbling sound in his ears. It was the huge movement of the flaming chariot transformed by Luo Seng rushing towards him. Although he couldn't see clearly, his ears were still useful. The only flaw was that Luo Seng had sprinkled a large amount of grease around him, burning with flames. This greatly affected Solong Daiji's judgment, making his eyes almost a decoration. Another point is under his feet. Under the influence of high temperature, the ice field under his feet was also melting rapidly. Soon a huge depression was formed, but no lake was formed because all the water was rapidly vaporizing. Boom! The flame chariot came out of the fog again. When he approached, the dazzling golden flame was still so obvious. Solong Daiji's eyes suddenly became solid. He decided to touch Luo Seng head-on to test his opponent's strength. As a reinforcement-type alien, he was not afraid of head-on collision. Holding the diamond stick tightly in his hand, facing the giant fireball that was crushing him, Solong Daiji roared and swept it horizontally with a stick. Only in this way can the force be avoided to the greatest extent. Boom! The full force of the diamond stick hit Luo Seng's body hard. The golden flames spread like meteors, passing through the battlefield and falling everywhere. The sound was like thunder, and it could be heard clearly from several kilometers away. But after one stick, the imagined scene of stopping the opponent did not appear. Luo Seng, rolling in a spherical shape, could still unload most of Solong Daiji's force. Solong Daiji's pupils shrank suddenly, and he looked back to see Luo Seng flying in the air, greasy all over, burning with golden flames. Luo Seng's mouth was smiling like Maitreya Buddha, but there was a sense of mockery in it. He was wrapped in thick fat, and a lot of ghee was temporarily poured on him, which was not only a good fuel, but also secreted from the skin. In this way, a natural protective layer was formed. Facing a strengthening alien like Solong Daiji, this was an excellent defense. Luo Seng stopped rolling after landed on all fours, and suddenly sprayed a golden flame at Luo Seng. The flame was slender, like a silk thread when it came out, and then slowly thickened, shooting hundreds of meters long in one breath. The high-temperature flame was aimed at Solong Daiji. Solong Daiji's moves had just been used up, and he was caught off guard and could only use his arms to block and quickly dodge. However, wherever he hid, Luo Seng's flame followed him like a shadow. Soon his arms became charred. Solong Daiji gritted his teeth and felt a sharp pain. Even a well-trained body could not withstand such a high-temperature flame. Luo Seng was very proud. The flame ice spray can reach 5,000 degrees Celsius, and even the strongest materials can be melted. Solong Daeji had to retreat and roll to avoid it. When he looked up again, his flesh and blood had been burned black. If he had not used his supernatural power to offset the heat of the flame, he would have been burned to charcoal at this time. Solong Daeji's face was extremely calm. As an ascetic, he once knelt on the mountain road of the snow-capped mountains in a single piece of clothing on a cold winter day. He didn't frown even though he was pierced by stones and bleeding. He could bear this injury. But at this time, the injury left by Gelly's dying blow could no longer be suppressed. Gelly was also a reinforcement-type alien, and he knew the weaknesses of the reinforcement system. Even if the skin, bones, and muscles can be made flawless, the organs are still fragile in order to maintain physiological functions. That blow caused internal injuries to Solong Daeji. At the beginning, he could still suppress it by force, but once he started fighting with all his strength, his internal organs would ache. This is undoubtedly fatal in a duel between masters. Solong Daeji had a cold face, and the muscles on his arms swelled. The vitality and regeneration ability of the reinforcement-type alien were terrifying. The injuries caused by the burns would not bleed, nor would they affect his combat effectiveness. Luo Xing stared at Solong Daeji, but he still had a Mithria-like smile on his face, which gave people a more terrifying feeling. Flame is his main means of attack. In addition, looking at his body, he also has great strength and defense in close combat. But in terms of pure strength and speed, I have an absolute advantage. Then let's play to our strengths and avoid our weaknesses. After being injured, Solong Daeji quickly formulated a strategy in his mind. Luosong's body had already coiled into a huge meatball, with golden flames burning fiercely, and began to roll again. But at this moment, Solong Daeji roared, crushed the ground under his feet, and rushed straight to Luo Xing. Before he could roll, he rushed to Luo Xing at a high speed. At the beginning, you used the advantage of distance to roll and increase your speed. But with such a fat body, it must be difficult to start, right? If I don't let you roll, I'll see what you can use to hit me. Chapter 1297 Weapon Spirit. Solong Daeji discovered the characteristics of Luosong's attack method. Luosong's impact force comes from the power after acceleration, but his own power is definitely not stronger than Solong Daeji. Therefore, just interrupt the spell. Solong Daeji rushed to Luo Xing, who was now coiled up and could not escape Solong Daeji's speed at all. The Vajra stick was like a thunderbolt in the clear sky, waving in the air, leaving a terrifying afterimage, and the explosion sounded like thunder, hitting Luosong's fat body heavily. Puff! The Vajra stick sank deeply into the flesh, and the layers of surface fat and fat were whipped, rippling a layer of flesh waves. Although a lot of the terrifying power was unloaded, it still whipped Luo Xing directly out, like a kicked ball. Bang! The huge meatball fell to the ground and bounced violently on the ground for more than 10 times before stopping. Luosong's blood was boiling, but after the layers of natural defense to unload the force, he was not beaten into mud. But a terrible bruise was still left on his body, and soon the scar left by the diamond stick turned dark purple. It works, come again. Solong Daeji took advantage of the victory and pursued, like a flash of lightning, leaping into the air with the force of thunder, and hit Luosong's head with a stick. The ultimate power is so terrifying that it can restrain all the fancy things. Luosong's face changed, and his fat body rolled away dangerously. Boom! The earth shattered in response, and a large amount of ice and snow was shattered and flew out. After this battle, the snowfield has been sunk more than 10 meters, and white steam spreads around. No one can see what happened inside. Zhang Yi looked calm, but he said to Liang Yu, "Get ready to go on stage." "It's your turn soon," Liang Yu said. "Do you think Solong Daeji can't win?" Zhang Yi said lightly, "There is a high probability that he will lose." It's not because Zhang Yi looks down on Solong Daeji's strength. It's because of the injuries on Solong Daeji's body. For the aliens who attack from a distance, the injuries to the internal organs can be suppressed by drugs and willpower. But for the aliens who fight in close combat, the injuries will be aggravated every time he exercises vigorously. Maybe he can suppress it at the beginning, but he can't help it later. Ha! A blazing flame wave rose from the battlefield surrounded by white mist, and it actually dispersed a large area of fog. This also allowed people to see the scene inside, clearly for a while. Sualong Daiji held the Vajra stick, and his tall body was like a black iron tower. He stepped on the ground with his feet, as if he was a Vajra that would not fall. And Luoseng appeared in the distance in a somewhat embarrassed manner, gasping for breath. There were 3 dark purple stick marks on his fat body, which looked hideous and terrifying. That part of the flesh and blood had been completely necrotic. If he didn't have so much fat on his body, these attacks would have torn his internal organs. This is why most of the generals in ancient times were pot-bellied and didn't care about muscles all over their bodies. A body shape that is really good for fighting must have fat as a buffer. Judging from the current situation, it is obvious that Sualong Daiji has the upper hand. The private soldiers of the Page family have bright eyes, as if they see the hope of victory. As expected of Lord Sualong Daiji, he is so powerful. This is the first warrior of our Page family. Who can defeat him? Maybe Lord Sualong Daiji can complete a 1-on-3 and defeat the aliens of their 3 families. It will be exciting then. The private soldiers of the Page family have begun to imagine beautiful things. Zhang Yi and Liang Yu looked at Sualong Daiji on the field, but they did not think the situation was very optimistic. Sualong Daiji, who seemed to have no problems, subconsciously had a small movement of contracting his abdomen when he was moving. This could not be hidden from Zhang Yi and the others. Sualong Daiji's internal injuries were getting worse and worse, and he had to be forcibly restrained to keep him on the field. Unless he could quickly take down Luoseng in front of him. Otherwise, the longer the battle dragged on, the more disadvantageous it would be for him. But how could he take down this greasy fat man with hundreds of pounds of fat? Sualong Daiji's eyebrows were raised, and he knew that his injuries were taking effect. We must fight quickly. Looking at Luoseng in front of him, he slowly twisted the Vajra stick. The next moment, he stomped his feet on the ground and rushed towards Luoseng like a cannonball. This time, the Vajra stick in his hand turned into a spear, and he began to attack Luoseng with the spikes on the other end. Luoseng also felt Sualong Daiji's desperate intention, and his face was still full of smiles. He crossed his arms, and more terrifying flames surged from his body. One after another, the flames circled like a long snake and bit Sualong Daiji. The blazing flames burned Sualong Daiji's hair, turning him into a big black bald head. But he was not afraid at all. He used the Vajra stick in his hand to disperse the flames one by one despite the scorching heat, and then ran towards Luoseng without slowing down. But at this moment, the big fat man like a meatball did not choose to fight Sualong Daiji head-on. Instead, he bounced like a ball, he jumped back and dodged. Hee, your injury has flared up, right? If you keep dragging it out, you'll vomit blood soon. Who wants to risk their life with you? Luoseng had already seen the problem with Sualong Daiji. Luoseng knew Jello's strength very well. He risked his life for a dying blow, and even a master like Sualong Daiji would definitely be seriously injured. Then just delay it slowly. Luoseng began to distance himself and launched a long-range attack on Sualong Daiji with high-temperature flames. Zhang Yi found that as the man continued to fight, his figure seemed to shrink a little. He's starting to get a little thinner? In other words, he stores fat in his body and treats himself as an oil tank. Zhang Yi touched his chin. Interesting. But soon, he said to Liang Yu next to him, "Get ready, it's your turn soon." Liang Yu nodded, holding a long knife in her hand. In order to hide her identity, this was naturally not Long Ming, but another adamantium metal weapon. "By the way, don't forget to bring this," Zhang Yi said, reaching out to lift Huahua from his shoulder and put her in Liang Yu's arms. Liang Yu was dumbfounded. She stared at Huahua blankly. "What are you doing?" Zhang Yi said with a matter-of-fact expression, "As an alien who can control beasts, it is reasonable for you to bring a war beast with you when you go to the battlefield, right?" Until this time, Liang Yu finally understood why Zhang Yi was so confident that he would win this duel. Because from the perspective of strength, Hua, who has opened the gene lock, is more powerful than Liangyu. If such a combination appears, it will be a complete bug-level existence. Liangyu was stunned for a long time and finally uttered a sentence. I thought you thought I was the genius picked out of a million. Zhang Yi pointed at Hua with a smile. Even if you are a genius, it would be safer to give you a spirit weapon, right? Chapter 1298, Smart People. On the battlefield, the battle between Solong Deji and Luo Zhang was still going on fiercely. Solong Deji was like a hunter, holding a diamond stick and chasing Luo Zhang. Luo Zhang knew that close combat was not conducive to the use of his abilities, so he kept wandering and fighting, and constantly used high-temperature flames to attack Solong Deji. The strength of the two people was relatively close, but the injuries on Solong Deji's body were like a time bomb, and it was unknown when it would explode. So in this way, Solong Deji had to suppress his injuries while anxiously wanting to end the battle. His speed and strength were stronger than Luo Zhang, so he quickly caught up with Luo Zhang and fiercely raised the diamond stick in his hand and smashed Luo Zhang's body. Luo Zhang had no choice but to turn around and choose to bear Solong Deji's attack on his back. Bang! A dull sound rang on the flat ground, like a muffled thunder. The fat on Luo Zhang's back was stacked like waves, but it still couldn't completely remove Solong Deji's strength. The Vajra stick, at a very fast speed, actually tore open Luo Zhang's back like a sharp blade. Blood splattered, Luo Zhang uttered a muffled groan, and then flew forward with the help of this force. Solong Deji was already bloodthirsty and followed closely, slashing down with stick after stick. Facing the blazing flames around Luo Zhang, his Vajra stick ruthlessly fell on Luo Zhang's back. Ah! The stick fell, and the skin and flesh were torn apart again. Even a fat man like Luo Zhang couldn't help but wail. He was carrying a body of several hundred kilograms, but he ran even faster. Luo Zhang also knew that Solong Deji was fighting desperately, but he didn't want to die with Solong Deji, so he could only choose to run away and delay time. So on the battlefield, a very funny scene appeared. Two first-class aliens in the snowy plateau were like gangsters. One was running desperately in front, and the other was hitting with a Vajra stick in the back. Well, this is probably what is called returning to basics. Everyone looked at this scene, and although they felt a little funny in their hearts, no one really laughed. Everyone stared at them, wanting to see who could hold on to the end. Finally, after more than 10 minutes of fighting, Solong Deji's injuries finally made his movements a little uncoordinated. And this uncoordinatedness was reflected in the slowdown in his pursuit of Luo Zhang. Luo Zhang's back had been beaten to pieces, but what flowed out was not only blood, but more white fat and yellow grease. He looked seriously injured, but he still ran fast, screaming as he ran. On the contrary, Solong Deji's slow movements were a little heavy. Most people couldn't see the movements of the two clearly and didn't know how the battle was going. They only knew that Solong Deji had been suppressing Luo Zhang, and Luo Zhang had only the opportunity to run away. But Zhang Yi and Liangyu clearly saw the problem with Solong Deji. Luo Zhang felt the sharp wind of the stick behind him, and the long-suppressed anger finally burned. But he was not in a hurry, but continued to run forward. He only suffered some superficial injuries, which were painful but not fatal, so he could still maintain a good fighting capacity. Wait a little longer. Until the injuries to Solong Deji's internal organs were completely broken, he would turn around and roast him into a fragrant, roasted whole lamb. Luo Zhang was making a perfect plan in his mind. Suddenly, Solong Deji, who had been chasing him desperately, stopped. He slowly slowed down and stood on the snowfield. Luo Zhang also stopped in the distance, staring at Solong Deji with a puzzled and cautious look. Why does he suddenly look so calm? Is he going to use some tricks? Luo Zhang realized that something was wrong, because Solong Deji's expression was too calm, as if he didn't care about what he did. It was as if he was going to risk his life. Luo Zhang was as if he was facing a great enemy. He lowered his body, and his thick limbs supported the ground like pillars. After taking a deep breath, his body swelled up like a balloon. His originally fat body actually doubled in size. This was his defensive posture. No matter what kind of attack he faced, he could use this body of fat as a natural defense. At this moment, Solong Daeji opened his mouth and said in a voice that was not loud but loud enough for everyone to hear, "I give up." There was a moment of dead silence on both sides of the battlefield. No one spoke. Almost everyone looked at Solong Daeji on the battlefield with incredible eyes. Many people even suspected that they had hallucinations. Even Luo Sang on the battlefield couldn't understand why Solong Daeji would give up at this time. If he gave up, there would be only one person left in the Paji family. That person would have to fight Luo Sang first when he appeared on the stage again. Even after winning, he would have to face the last person of the 3 coalition forces. Luo Sang still retains a relatively strong fighting power. Is Solong Daeji so confident about the person who is about to appease Luo Sang couldn't understand. Only when Zhang Yi saw Solong Daeji walking towards the army without looking back did he smile and nod. He's a smart man. Solong Daeji is Paji Gasang's true confidant and is inseparable from Paji Gasang. Over the years, he has learned a lot from him. So he is not a reckless man. He knows that there is no point in dying in vain, and only by living can he create higher value. The most important thing is that he is also the only person in the Paji family besides Paji Gasang who knows Zhang Yi's identity. If there is an Epsilon-level strongman in the rear, and you can rest assured, then Solong Daeji's self-righteous desperate fight can only be said to be stupid. It was not until Solong Daeji walked back to the army and came to Paji Gasang with one hand on his chest and bowed that the people of the Paji family had to accept the current facts. Many people were indignant and denounced Solong Daeji's cowardice. But Paji Gasang said to him with a smile, "You have tried your best. Very good. You know how to preserve your strength, and you have not followed me in vain for all these years." Everyone was very surprised by Paji Gasang's attitude. Paji Gasang did not explain and asked Solong Daeji to go down for treatment. Solong Daeji said, "My body can still hold on. I hope I can watch this battle," he said, looking at Zhang Yi. He was also very curious whether Zhang Yi would personally go out to ensure victory in this battle. In any case, there must be a top master fighting, and he didn't want to miss it. Chapter 1299 Liang Yu appears. Solong Daeji's surrender made Luo Sang puzzled. Inexplicably, he won? In fact, if Solong Daeji really fought with him, even if he won, it would only be a miserable victory. They all lived in the snowy plateau. Although these top aliens rarely fought directly, they could roughly understand the strength of each other through various intelligence. Solong Daeji was definitely not an opponent to be underestimated. But soon, Luo Sang felt resentful again. If Solong Daeji had no intention of fighting with him, wouldn't it mean that he had been beaten for nothing for half a day? Solong Daeji chased him and slashed for 3 streets, then turned around and left. He won, but it was a very frustrating win. However, Daeji and others didn't care about these at all. Their faces were full of smiles. They had already defeated 2 opponents. As long as they defeated the last one, they would win the final victory. Xia Jiatsua frowned slightly. Although he had a relaxed smile on his face, he still said cautiously, "Even Solong Daeji has admitted defeat. They look a little strange. I just don't know whether they have given up winning or losing, or have a stronger backup." Lemon Oja heard this and nodded, and said carefully, "Chiba, the last warrior to fight is arranged by you personally, so we don't have to worry. But the opponent is so confident. Will there be an Epsilon-level aliens?" Epsilon is a dividing line, and the gap in strength between the upper and lower levels is extremely huge. As long as the opponent is not Epsilon, then even if a 9,900-point alien is sent out at this time, it will still need to go through the 2 warriors of the 3 coalition forces in a round-robin battle, which is at a natural disadvantage. Chiba looked into the distance, which was the direction of the Great Snow Mountain. Don't worry, if they really send out an Epsilon-level alien, this battle will become simple. The meaning is already very clear. If there is external interference in the snowy plateau, especially if a strong man of the Epsilon level takes action, the Burial Master, as the guardian of the snowy plateau, will never intervene. As long as he can see the Buddha's light of the Great Snow Mountain, the burial master is invincible and fearless of any opponent. With Deiji's guarantee, the two family heads were relieved at this time. Soon they looked at the opposite army formation and began to wait for the other side to send out the third warrior. Deiji was old, and his eyes were a little turbid, but in the turbidity, a sharp flash occasionally flashed. He guessed that the native aliens of the Paji family were no longer good enough. So the next one to play must be the mercenaries invited by the other side. The man in the video image who was wearing black armor and slaughtered the 4 Dharma protectors of Songjia Temple. But soon, he knew that he guessed wrong. In the slightly nervous eyes of Paji Gasang and others, Zhang Yi signaled Liang Yu to play. He did not forget to remind, "Kill them all, don't hold back." Liang Yu replied, "I know that a life-and-death duel is glorious. Just like the life-and-death duel between warriors, I will not be soft-hearted." Hua had already slipped into Liang Yu's arms through the gap in her clothes. According to Zhang Yi's instructions, it would not take action for the time being, but wait for the critical moment, and then it would attack if Liang Yu was in danger. After all, it was a surprise weapon, and if it was put in the open, the opponent would be on guard. So, Liang Yu, wearing a silver-gray exoskeleton armor and holding a long sword, walked towards the snowfield battlefield. She was wearing armor and no one knew who she was, but she could still be seen as a woman by her figure. As for Liang Yu, the outside world did not know much about her. Even Paji Gasang only knew that she was an alien beside Zhang Yi. On the other side, Luo Seng had taken medicine to suppress the injuries in his body and injected stimulants to temporarily increase his body's explosive power and weaken his body's pain. His huge cloth bag-like body was on all fours, with golden flames burning on the surface of his skin, and his eyes were fixed on the last opponent in front of him. As long as he defeated Liang Yu, he would be able to represent the coalition camp and win the final victory. Liang Yu walked onto the battlefield, surrounded by white steam that made it difficult to see the scene clearly. Liang Yu slowly pulled out the long sword in his hand, raised it high, and slashed the bright long sword down in the air.
Boom.
A blue airflow suddenly burst out from the blade. On the entire battlefield, the diffuse white steam was fiercely split in half from the middle, and then rolled back to both sides. Soon, the white mist on the battlefield was expelled, allowing everyone to see its original appearance. Luo Seng stared at Liang Yu, intending to repeat the old trick. His body quickly turned into a huge fireball, rumbling towards Liang Yu. The surging flames emitted a scorching high temperature, and the thick fat formed an excellent protective layer on his body surface, which was the best way to restrain physical attacks. Liang Yu raised his left arm slowly, and the armor on his left arm popped open with a buzzing sound, revealing the launcher underneath. Liang Yu aimed at the direction where Luo Seng was rolling. He was like a huge fireball, approaching quickly. Even though he was hundreds of meters away, he could already feel its high temperature. Liang Yu fired more than a dozen micro-missiles without hesitation, blocking Luosong's attack. Direction. Boom! The missile exploded in the area around Luo Seng, and a large amount of thick, white smoke rose. Luosong's body was frozen for a moment while rolling, and even the flames on his body seemed to be blown by the wind, and quickly dimmed with a whoosh. Liang Yu did not launch an ordinary missile, but a special missile containing liquid nitrogen. As one of the best refrigeration elements in the world, it can quickly reduce the surrounding temperature to -200 degrees. Luosong's ability is flame, and liquid nitrogen can absorb the heat he releases and consume his superpowers. Sure enough, this extreme low temperature is much lower than the temperature in the air, and the heat energy released by Luosong's flames is absorbed in large quantities. This also caused the power of the flames that he could release to be greatly weakened when he came in front of Liang Yu. Facing the meat bomb chariot in front of him, Liang Yu did not blindly use the long knife to chop. Luo Seng in a rolling posture, coupled with the oil on the surface of the skin, can greatly remove physical attacks from all angles. If you act rashly, you will even be hit by his body. As an expert in actual combat, Liang Yu had observed his fight with Solong Deiji from the sidelines, so she certainly wouldn't make the same mistake. She leaped into the air and dodged the rolling Luo Seng. Liang Yu soared into the air like a nimble bird, and her slender fingers, under the reflection of the fire, flickered with strands of golden light. Chapter 1300 Nanowires. Luo Seng rushed through the area where Liang Yu was, but was evaded by Liang Yu deftly. However, in Liang Yu's left hand, extremely thin nanowires were fired from the launcher. Luo Seng continued to charge at Liang Yu after failing to get the upper hand. Liang Yu repeated the same trick and continued to fire liquid nitrogen to consume Luo Seng. She didn't even need to deliberately shoot Luo Seng. After all, this liquid nitrogen missile was not very aggressive, but it could greatly reduce the temperature of the surrounding environment. Luo Seng, who continued to release flames, would continuously release energy to the outside world. The presence of liquid nitrogen caused his energy consumption to increase sharply, and the power of the flames was also greatly weakened. Luo Seng noticed the opponent's tactics, and his heart sank. He had to take advantage of his strong body defense and attack with a chariot, continuing to collide with Liang Yu. Liang Yu did not accept the challenge and dodged Luo Seng again and again. She was extremely fast, and her movements to dodge Luo Seng were like playing dodgeball, calm and elegant, without any urgency. After more than 10 rounds of dodging, Luo Seng finally stopped his movements. It was not because he was tired, but because he suddenly found that his movements were disturbed by something, so that his skin was painful as if it was cut by countless scalpels. His movements also became slow. Luo Seng stopped and looked at his body carefully. Suddenly, his pupils shrank sharply. I don't know since when his body was actually wrapped with extremely thin silk threads. Those were silk threads made of nanomaterials with extremely high toughness. When they were first wrapped around him, Liang Yu did not use force to pull them, but kept releasing them. With the help of Luo Seng's rolling, they quickly wrapped around his whole body. This kind of extremely thin silk thread would not feel too much even if it was wrapped around the body. But after increasing in circles, a different effect was produced. The nano silk threads were deeply embedded in his fat. With the help of his own rolling power, the nano silk threads began to cut his fat. The principle is like he himself squeezed his fat into a large net. It's just that the material used to make the large net is nano silk threads that are sharper than a knife and extremely tough. If he still doesn't know and continues to fight, then Liang Yu won't need to do anything. He will kill himself. Luo Seng's scalp was numb, and his whole body felt extremely cold. He had never heard of this kind of fighting style, and he had only seen it in his life. However, it was not his fault. When the Southwest region decided to return to the past Tusi rule era, their infighting and retroness led to their obvious backwardness in various fields, including combat thinking and skills. When they were still fighting with brute force, Liang Yu and Zhang Yi, who were practical fighters, had already started to fight with all means. Liang Yu looked at Luo Seng, who stopped moving, and said lightly, "It seems that you finally found it." She held a long knife and walked towards Luo Seng step by step. "I advise you not to act rashly, otherwise you will be easily cut into pieces of meat." Luo Seng heard this and sneered angrily. "Do you think this little trick can restrain me? It's ridiculous." Although he didn't know what kind of silk thread Liang Yu used, how could such a thin weapon cause much damage to his body with amazing defense? "Aha!" Luo Seng roared, and his body suddenly swelled up. He was like a yellow cloth bag, and as he swelled, the silk threads wrapped around his body became clearer. To be precise, it was the deep dents on his body that looked a bit hideous. Luo Seng exerted force violently. Puff, 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 puff. The silk threads made of nanomaterials were actually broken abruptly. However, his flesh and blood were also cut into hideous cuts. "Ah!" Luo Seng wailed again, but this time he wailed because of pain. Zhang Yi couldn't help but take a breath of cold air. What a ruthless person. But he is also an idiot. Luo Seng didn't know what nanomaterials were. The toughness of this kind of silk thread was unimaginable, and it was not steel wire. He actually tried to break it with his flesh and blood. His courage is commendable, but his IQ is worrying. Soon, Luo Seng was covered in blood. Fat and blood were everywhere, and his body was full of wounds. The more painful it was, The tighter the nanowires wrapped around his body became, just like a ball of thread that couldn't be torn apart. At this time, Liang Yu had already approached with a knife. Luosong's pupils shrank suddenly, and his throat moved violently. When Liang Yu approached him, he suddenly opened his mouth, and a vajra shot out of his throat, heading straight for Liang Yu's face. Liang Yu didn't dodge, and the long knife in his hand was wrapped in blue air, and he chopped it directly. Clang! The vajra was directly bounced away. Liang Yu came close to Luoseng, raised his knife, and chopped. Luoseng was really anxious at this time. His body released ultra-high temperature flames, and a fire dragon spewed out from his mouth, circling and completely wrapped Liang Yu. But soon, Liang Yu's silver-white figure rushed out of the flames. The exoskeleton armor on her body was made by Liu Karen himself, and it could withstand both ultra-high and ultra-low temperatures. Even thousands of degrees of high temperature, it is not a problem to withstand it in a short period of time. At this time, Liang Yu had already killed Luoseng. He was trapped in his own cocoon. Originally, the nanothreads released by Liang Yu were simply loosely wrapped around him. But as he continued to roll and struggle, these irregularly entangled nanothreads became more and more entangled. As long as he exerted a little force to move, the threads deeply embedded in his flesh and blood would continue to cut, making him feel painful all over his body as if he was being tortured. Go to hell. Liang Yu's cold voice came like the god of death. Her figure had already arrived in front of Luoseng. The long knife in his hand was aimed at his fat belly, and the knife wrapped in blue air cut across. The speed of this knife was too fast. When Luoseng, who was restricted in his movements, wanted to dodge, the knife had already swept a blue afterimage in the air. Luoseng only felt a chill on his stomach. Then, there was an intense and unimaginable pain. Puff! His body was directly split in two by Liang Yu from the abdomen, and a large amount of contents flowed out instantly: yellow fat, greasy intestines, and internal organs, crashing, poured all over the ground. After Liang Yu's knife, he quickly retreated more than 10 meters away, barely avoiding these things. But seeing this scene, the people on both sides of the battlefield couldn't help but feel nauseous, and even couldn't help wanting to vomit. Dear viewers, this video ends here, and we reached 1300, so stay tuned, you'll get all updates. Enjoy! Please like and comment if not already.